Hello, AP World History students. By the end of this lecture, you should be able to describe what went on in China during the post-classical era from 600 CE to 1450 CE, also known as the Yellow Period. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's go way back. So far we've covered the Neolithic Revolution and slowly moved through the classical era, the Purple Period, and now we're in the post-classical period, the age of trade and interactions. Always remember that. It's the age of trade and interactions, comes right before Columbus and his voyages of 1492. Really easy to remember those dates. Starts off with Islam, ends with Columbus and them sailing the ocean blue. All right. Some things we want to remember. We need to remember that the Silk Roads are super important, and understanding that the Silk Roads start in China and that they go all across to the Middle East. But notice here that China is one of the few areas that also has this awesome access to the Indian Ocean trade network too. And also notice that China has some of the most amount of important cities along the Silk Road. Just remember that. Also, this is where we need to go back and kind of remember the Chinese dynasties, because the dynasties are also going to be important throughout the Yellow Period as well. Remember Shi Huangdi, the first person, he's the first emperor of China, unites them all together. And then you also need to remember the dynastic songs. So at this point, you should have it set to memory so that you'll never forget it. Just in case you have, I'll go through it. Sheng Zhou Chen Han, Sheng Zhou Chen Han, Sui Tang Song, Sui Tang Song. Yangmingqing Republic, Yangmingqing Republic, Mao Zedong, Mao Zedong. Focusing right now, we've done the Shang, the Zhou, the Qin with Shi Huangdi, and the Han. This period, we're going to go through the Sui Tang Song. Let's go through the Han first, because I know many of you are like, Han, I forgot that already. Don't even remember it. Let's go through. So the Han is all about filial piety, and filial piety means veneration of ancestors, veneration of adults, but mainly veneration of men. Yes, you got it. Patriarchy always. She's out. Nobody really cares about her. But all this filial piety is because of Confucianism. Confucianism, big during the Purple Period. All right, chain of command, you got Confucius. You'll always know Confucius because of his lovely goatee here and sideburns. Remember, the chain of command is always Confucianism. Remember that they're really big into meritocracy, meaning that the scholar gentry, once again, scholar gentry are at the head of the government. They're at the head of the class, and anybody can move up. Ergo, meritocracy. Earn demerits, okay? Not demerits, but demerits. All right. We know that the Han Dynasty is going to come to an end because of this guy here, who would kind of be a little rock looking like if it wasn't for his yellow eyes. But the nomads from the north come in and they invade, they take over, and they take over the Han Dynasty. The Han Dynasty is going to collapse. On Friday, we're going to talk a little bit more about, like, after the fall of the Han Dynasty, how Buddhism is going to proliferate. That means it's going to spread across China. It's going to invade, one of the most popular being, of course, Theravada and Mahayana. But Buddhism coming from, of course, India, here, and it's going to spread everywhere else, especially to my favorite, Sri Lanka. All right. What happened to China after the Han Dynasty collapsed? Well, the Han Dynasty collapses, once again, 226 CE. Know that date. Remember it, live it, love it. 226 CE. But why did it collapse again? It collapsed because of those pesky peasants. Remember them? During the Yellow Turban Revolt in the 180 CE? Those peasants were also Taoist. They were really Taoist. Their crops had failed, and they just assumed, like, hey, wait a minute, the mandate of heaven is lost. And since the mandate of heaven is lost, all Hades breaks loose. They get an emperor, the Shao. He's kidnapped and then he's killed at 13 years old because he's really weak. And then after that, the noble, the landowners are like, hey, wait a minute, okay? All right, we don't want to pay our taxes anymore. Instead, we're just going to pay for people to protect us and to fight for us. The northern nomads come in, the Xiongnu, they come in, they attack, and then we go back into the battle. For 300 years, they fight. They fight for 300 years, warring states period, to see who's going to come out on top. Who comes out on top? Well, it's going to be the Sui dynasty. Confucianism is completely discredited because, as we said, with legalism under the Qin, nobody wants to follow Confucianism once all Hades breaks loose. But one religion is going to grow, and that religion, of course, is going to be Buddhism, or as Charday likes to say, Buddhism. It's going to grow. So these Chinese dynasties are going to pop up, the Sui, the Tang, and the Song. And you know it is because they're close to 600, ending around before the end of the period. All right, Sui dynasty reunifies China, but it only lasts like a short period of time. It only lasts for 38 years, which is kind of just like the Qin dynasty in 220s BCE. And the reason why it doesn't last that long is because they're super brutal and they're super oppressive. Nobody wants to be beaten down over and over again. At some point in time, you're snatching that bar out of the hand of the brutalist. I don't even think that's a word. And you're starting to say, I want to stand up for myself. But what you do need to remember about the Sui dynasty is that they basically restore the imperial customs under the Han dynasty. They bring back standardization and centralization. This is a major continuity, guys. Continuity. Same thing's happening. So standardization and centralization is going from the purple period and is continuing throughout the yellow period. Confucianism, they restart civil service exams. And then they continue to work on that Great Wall of China. We all know that the Rome ain't built in a day, and neither was the Great Wall of China. The other things we need to know is that the Great Wall of China is our example of monumental architecture, but so is this thing here, the Grand Canal, but we'll get to that later. These are all our continuities. Really important. That means that you probably should write on your paper, these are continuities. They also bring back the capital, Chang'an. It's the same capital that they had in the early Han Dynasty. But the only thing that changes is going to be Buddhism. Buddhism is still going to be a big, huge presence during the Sui times. And again, it's because Buddhism is a missionary religion. Missionary as in they recruit new people. They go out and recruit new people, not as in missionary as the other way. So it's overthrown by peasant rebellions in 618 CE. We'll find out more about that later. We're going to find out a little bit about it now. And that's because the big reason why the peasants rebel is because the peasants don't want to conquer Korea. During the Sui dynasty, they try to brutally take over Korea. Korea is now just one place. It's not north or south. It's just Korea. And the peasants are like, we don't want to do this one. We don't want to serve in your army. So they deliberately break their arms and legs to avoid something called conscription. This word here, conscription, literally means the draft. So they draft just like they drafted military personnel during the Vietnam War and during World War II. Conscription means that they have a draft during this time too. And the lower class people are like, we didn't want to fight. We don't want to fight this. Well, long story short, them trying to take the Sui dynasties, trying to conquer of Korea fails, but they lose lots and lots of money trying to fight it. They lose lots of money and lots of resources and lots of arms. But they are successful in building this thing, and this is called the Grand Canal. A canal is basically an artificial river. It's a fake river that's built by people, and it's cheap and easy transportation for trade. So we've heard of other types of canals, like the Panama Canal. This canal is going to stretch from Beijing all the way to Hangzhou. That's a long canal. Like, look at this. Like it's 6 inches on the screen. That means it's got to be hundreds of miles. But they're going to use that for easy transportation. Again, it's an example of the efficiency of government in order to be able to do this. They're manipulating geography. So if we were doing a spice chart, this would be our I for interaction with geography. Manipulating geography this time, not for agricultural purposes, as during the green and the purple period. Now they're manipulating geography for trade purposes. Manipulating geography for trade purposes. I'll say that a lot slower. Manipulating geography for trade purposes. Kind of weird, but you just need to remember that. The next comes the Tang. Sweet Tang. And of course, you know, song's going to be coming up. The Tang follows the Sui like the Han followed the Qin. That means golden age, baby. And remember, if we always remember, a golden age just means it's a time of wealth, of riches, of peace, and all kinds of things. But it's only for the men. You'll find out why. Tang Dynasty lasts for a little bit like 200 years. Little over 200 years. I need to learn how to count. That's 618 CE to 900 CE. China is going to begin to expand, and it expands into Tibet, which is it was on the subcontinent of South Asia, and Mongolia in Central Asia. Guys, this is important. This is a political change. So if you're looking at our spice chart, political change. The Tang is now encompassing parts of the Tang Dynasty includes East Asia, China, Tibet, South Asia, and Mongolia, Central Asia. That's big. The capital is still going to be Chang'an. Yeah. That means that that's a continuity. And it's going to be the Silk Road hub, 2 million residents, the biggest city in the post-classical world. That's huge, humongous, great, fabulous for them. They're also going to have military booms. This is another political change that's going to be happening as well. They have this city called Kashgar. Kashgar is an awesome city. It's the westernmost city. You'll see it on the map that's coming up next. It's a prime location. It's basically the border of China. They need to protect the border of China, so they set up something called garrisons. Garrisons is just a fancy name for soldier. I feel like I want to have that on your quiz on Friday. It's just a fancy name for a soldier. So instead of saying the soldier in the army, he's a garrison in the army. They also have gunpowder. What? Yes, gunpowder. Our first fireworks and everything are coming out of China, and they're invented by Tang alchemist scientists around 900 CE. The economy is going to be booming way up, and because of the trade and because it's the golden age, baby, it's the time for it to be great. Manufacturing's up too. Remember, back in your reading, we said one of the big economic changes as a result of the Silk Road, the one way the Silk Road makes the impact is that people are now creating things in order to sell. This is exactly what they're beginning to do in China. They're manufacturing things so that they can trade it along the Silk Road. Those things that they're manufacturing, porcelain, like porcelain dolls or tea sets, silk, paper, iron. Iron's going to be huge, okay? And they're trading on the Grand Canal and the Silk Roads, and they're using paper money, no more bartering system. The government is also booming as well. The Confucian exams grow. Meritocracy, guys. That means that more people are able to, like Drake, start from the bottom and move on their way up. But if we're really honest, we know he didn't. So they begin to do that one. On this slide, you have both political and economic characteristics of the Tang Dynasty. Military is political, economy, economic, and government is political as well. We have some continuities here, and we have some changes in technology here, and continuity of Confucianism here. Oh, yeah, they had the census too. Yada, yada, yada. Let's move on to the next one. Here are the garrisons at Kashgar. So remember, I told you Kashgar is at the very end of China. Will be right here, guys. It's the last city. It needs to be protected, so they put lots of soldiers there to protect what's coming inside of the empire and outside of it as well. Notice here again, Tibet, here it's part of northern South Asia, and Mongolia, part of Central Asia. That's big. That's another, I guess you could do that as an interaction with geography too, a change that's happening with the Qing dynasty. Let's talk about technology. We talked about the printmaking system that they're having here, manufacturing of paper and books and things like that. Like these are the things that they use to manufacture more books. We've got the printing of paper here. Look at that. Nice. Okay. We also have ironworking here. Don't know why she has red hair, but she does. But we have ironworking here. And we see more metallurgy, ironworking, and something is exploding. The little girl is frightened. But we keep going on. The Tang dynasty first allows Buddhism, but oddly, it's then going to crush it. Buddhism enters China and then spreads because, as Dietrich told us, cultural diffusion. Shout out to Dietrich there. The Sui dynasty is still pro-Buddhism before the Tang dynasty comes along. But under the Tang dynasty, Buddhism is going to grow. That's a cultural change, guys. Buddhism is going to grow. And that's all because of this woman here. You'll see her on the next slide. Empress Wu. No, she's not a rap artist. She's actually just a really powerful woman that makes Buddhism a state-sponsored belief system in China for the first time ever. Around 800, after Empress Wu dies, people are afraid. China is going to be, and this is going to be something that China's like all the way through the 1900s. So for a long time, for a couple of millennia, China is really, really anti-foreign people. They're basically Trump. So they're anti anybody that's immigrant. Trump wants to make America great again. The Tang dynasty wanted to make China great again. They feared the foreign religion, and they called it foreign even though it came right down below in India. And they also were upset because they were like, hey, wait a minute. These monks don't pay us any taxes. No, we want our money, so they get rid of it. Around 845 CE, they start closing monasteries and they start defrocking monks. That sounds really innocent, but it's really, really kind of terrible because they close the monasteries violently, and by defrocking the monks go running and they go and catch them, strip them of their clothes, and like kind of try to do away with their religion. It's really kind of sad. Here's little Empress Wu. And you're going to see this picture at some point within the next year, and perhaps even on the AP exam, you're going to see this picture of Buddhist statues in China. And so we can see these are an example of cultural syncretism. syncretism. Cultural syncretism. The spread of and the mix of religion from one place to another. So it's cultural diffusion of Buddhism, and then they're mixing it with their own Chinese beliefs in China. Tang dynasty is going to end at 907 CE, and that's just because, once again, it always happens. You remember this from the beginning of the year. Well, some of you remember it. Warlords stop obeying the emperor. They always stop obeying the emperor. They're basically like Rauner if Miss Liqueur wasn't there. Tensions between Confucianism and Buddhism weakens the Tang dynasty. Here's why Confucianists hate Buddhists. Confucianists hate Buddhists because two reasons. Buddhists are monks. That means they're celibate. They don't engage in sex, they don't get married, and they don't have children. 2, they live separate from everybody else in monasteries, and they don't really interact with other people. The Confucianists are like, wait a minute. Do you think you're better than us because you live separate from us? Confucianism values people being part of the government and the society. Hello, filial piety, guys. Filial piety requires them to have children. So they must have children. Another thing is why they consider Confucianists consider Buddhists offensive, is because, they don't have children, and that they're not being part of the society, so they find it like a threat. The next thing is there are these people called eunuchs. If anybody in here watches Game of Thrones, I kind of hope that you don't, because Game of Thrones is way too old for you guys. But anyway, if you get a chance, watch it with your parent. Second thought, don't do that. It's a little disturbing. But watch Game of Thrones. Eunuchs grow powerful. Eunuchs are men that are castrated. Look that up on your own time. Some of you guys are crossing your legs right now. They're castrated so that they won't have affairs with any of the emperor's wives or concubines. So emperor's wives, they can have multiple wives, and they can also have concubines. Concubines are their side pieces, basically. Hopefully I'm allowed to say that. That means that they're not married to them, but they keep them kind of in a back house in the back of the castle. And you know what happens there. Well, anyway, the eunuchs are really, really close to the family because they act as guards for the family and the royal household. So they know all the secrets. Because they know all the secrets, they get a little too powerful, and it ends up with everybody being corrupt and lying and backstabbing. And it's basically a giant telenovela, and the eunuchs are vying for who can control the emperor. So these three things here are going to result in the collapse. Cause and effects. Cause, these three, effects, end of the Tang dynasty. But then, as with everything, peasants uprise. They're always rising up. They're always like, hey, we just want to have some money. Give us some food. We're tired and we're hungry. Always uprisings. The Song dynasty picks up the Fumble Golden Age from the Tang, and they lasted the 1200s. This is big. You guys know it. From the Song dynasty, Chinese population doubles, and that's all because of champa rice. Champa rice is basically the ramen noodles of ancient history. Champa rice from Vietnam, it's so easy to grow. It provides enough nutrients. People aren't dying. There are no more famines. Everybody's getting fat and happy. Here are some continuities from the Tang to the Song dynasties. Economic continuity. Silk roads, urbanization, booming. Trade. Manufacturing of silk, porcelain, print, cannons, because they have gunpowder. Trade profits lead to economic innovation. People are starting to do letters of credit. Now you can buy things on a credit card and pay later. They also are continuing with government administration. Civil service grows as more and more people take exams. So we can see here the total population of China, of the Chinese Empire, doubles. It grows at a slow and steady pace for 1,500 years. And then all of a sudden, within the span of 500 years, it grows exponentially to over 1 billion people by 1990. Over 1 billion people. And now they're close to 2. They're so crowded. So they've been getting crowded for quite some time. All right, here are the changes during it. Northern nomads are trying to attack again, so they have to move the capital from Chang'an to Kaifeng. Think about it as the same way they moved the capital of the Roman Empire from Rome to Constantinople. Here's a concrete detail. The Song made cannons and invented bombs. Bombs, guys. They have bombs. So a concrete detail, specific, they moved the capital from Chang'an to Kaifeng. Concrete detail, the Song made cannons and invented bombs. We're going to come to the Mongols later. During the Song times, Neo-Confucianism grows as a religion. This is syncretism. Syncretism. Neo-Confucianism is basically Confucianism with a Buddhist Taoist twist. It's been a response to mystical Buddhism and Taoism. They try to make it more Confucian-y than Buddhism by itself, but it incorporates some of like the mysticism here from Buddhism and Taoism, some of the peacefulness and the inclusionary things from Buddhism and Taoism into Confucianism. Quite cool. They have more civil service exams, more powerful government for scholar gentry, going back to the Han Dynasty. But guys, oh my goodness, here's a big one. Patriarchy is growing. You thought it was strong. It's going to get even stronger. Sucks for the women. Under the Tang Dynasty, upper class women, sorry, can gain and inherit property, and they can move in public freely without a man. Under the Song Dynasty, they don't have that anymore. In fact, they practice something called foot binding. Societies usually get more patriarchal as they become more refined. This is a social development. Foot binding basically makes the foot smaller, and so that the foot of a woman becomes more decorative. So starting at a young age, they begin to wrap the woman's feet tightly so that their foot can become smaller and kind of take on this artistic shape. Unfortunately, foot binding kind of limits and reduces women to the household. If you can see here an example of foot binding, I should have gotten a woman's foot. Hopefully this is not a woman's foot, but this is my foot, hair and all. And this is the size of a regular woman's foot, and this is the size of a bound foot. The foot would literally be pushed in so that the heel of the foot would, as closely as possible, touch the arch of the toes in the front, because they thought it was a sign of beauty. You can still find traces of foot binding, but what it did is it bound women to the home, making it difficult for them to walk. And often women that had their foot bound had to be carried from place to place and couldn't travel on their own. It made sure that women would, the smaller woman's foot would be, the more likely she would be to marry a wealthier man or a man of higher class. So women would try to make their feet as small as possible. It's kind of similar to women wanting to make their waist as small as possible, or the popularity of the whole thigh gap thing. I don't get it. There's no gap in my thigh, but they would do that so that they would be able to stay in home. This was a tradition that was carried on for years. You can see the damaging effects of foot binding on women and their feet. I'll allow you to continue to, you can Google it to see even more damaging effects to it. You might be looking at this and saying like, oh, that's really sad, that's terrible, how could we do that to women? But we kind of do it to women today when we require them to wear heels as well. The Song Dynasty is going to fall apart as well. And the Song Dynasty is going to fall to another group of northern nomads. But this the Song Dynasty are going to be the Mongols. And the Mongols are going to be a force to be reckoned with. So, not so much the Jurchen, but the Mongols are going to wreak havoc, and they're going to be one of the strongest empires